here, but hopefully they'll join us as we proceed. So this is the Audit and Risk Committee meeting, Thursday, September 17th, and we'll call the meeting to order. And first of all, are there any declarations of conflict of interest? This is going to be a little bit difficult because so far there's over 30 people on the meeting and I can't see everybody. So between the clerk's help and the raising of hands, etc., that's what I'll have to watch for. And we'll go back and forth. And that's, I'm not sure exactly because we've never had this many people on the meeting before. Anyway, we'll get through it. The declaration of conflict of interest, seeing none. Approval of the agenda.
Oh, Councillor Starr, this is Jill, if I may interrupt for just one moment.
Okay.
If I could take a moment to briefly go over the electronic procedures and roll
sorry,
call.
I was going to do that as a 33A, but let's do that first.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll begin with a brief review of the protocols for electronic participation for this Audit and Risk Committee meeting. The public portion of this meeting is being streamed live, both audio and video, from the Region of Peel website. The people present in council chambers today are myself, Jill Jones, Committee Clerk, Catherine Lockyer, Regional Clerk and Interim Commissioner of Corporate Services, Sean Baird, Commissioner of Digital and Information Services, Jennifer Weinman, Acting Director of Enterprise Risk and Audit Services, and clerk staff required to facilitate the technology for the meeting. We are conducting this meeting using WebEx. For an optimum WebEx experience, we ask that you take the following measures. The recommended meeting display view is active speaker video view or active speaker and thumbnail video view. If you are experiencing a poor Wi-Fi connection, please disable your video. If you drop off the meeting, please rejoin, and if you have difficulties, Council committee members, please contact your local IT department first for assistance, following the same process as you do for council meetings. As required, your local IT department will reach out to regional IT staff for further assistance. Public committee members, please send us an email at council@peelregion.ca for assistance. So that's for our public members. Email council@peelregion.ca. You may choose to turn on your video and leave it on throughout the meeting, or you can turn on your video only when you are speaking. If you're having trouble or low bandwidth, you may also want to consider keeping your video off. If you wish to speak, please click on the round participant icon on the bottom of your screen to enable your participant list, and click on the hand icon located to the right of your name. Members who are connected to the meeting via the phone-in option may send an email to council@peelregion.ca and you will be added to the speakers list. When please do keep yourself muted, but when you're called upon, please unmute your microphone and proceed. And when you have concluded your comment or question, please mute your microphone and lower your hand by pressing the blue hand to the right of your name in the participant list. If you have any motions or amendments to introduce regarding the business on today's agenda, please email your motion to also council@peelregion.ca, identifying yourself as the mover. And in committee, seconders are not required. Committee motions do not permit a recorded vote. When a vote is called, the committee chair or clerk will call for any objections. If you have an objection, please unmute your microphone and indicate your name and objection. If no objections are stated, the motion will be deemed to be approved. We will be going into closed session today. So please note that when the meeting moves into closed session, those members who are participating remotely must ensure that no other person is in the location from which you are taking part in the meeting, or make appropriate arrangements so that any other persons cannot see or hear any of the confidential deliberations taking place. If this is not possible, the member must withdraw from the meeting until it has moved back into public session. Prior to moving into a closed session, members shall declare that they adhere to the confidentiality standards as outlined in the Regional Council and Committee Code of Conduct. Members who leave the meeting during the in-camera session and attempt to reconnect via the phone-in option will be required to send us an email at council@peelregion.ca indicating your request to rejoin the meeting. If you have any questions as we proceed through the meeting, please do send them to our council@peelregion.ca email. And now I will commence with the roll call. Councillor Dasco. Do we have Councillor Dasco on the list? Nope. Okay, marking as absent. Member Fairhead.
Present.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Fonseca.
Yes, here.
Thank you. Chair Yanika.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Raz. I do not see Councillor Raz on the list. I'll call a second time. Councillor Raz. Okay, marking is absent. Thank you. I had notification that Councillor Santos will not be attending, confirming she's not in the list. Thank you. Councillor Sinclair.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Starr.
Present.
Thank you. And Member Zuberi.
Yes, present.
Thank you very much. Handing it back to the chair. Thank you, Councillor Starr.
Okay, excuse me, thank you. Approval of the agenda. Councillor Fonseca, any changes, additions? Seeing none, all in favor? Approved. We have no delegations this morning, and we have a number of reports in front of us. And the first one, 5.1, is the traffic signals operations and maintenance contract. This is for information, and actually, 4 of the items are for information. So I'm going to indulge the committee. Would we like to see a brief presentation? These are for information, and maybe somebody from staff can answer if they've got some points that they want to make on these. These are pretty complete, long reports, so I'm sure that there was a lot of bedtime reading going on here. Any questions or comments from committee?
Councillor Starr? Pardon me, and I do apologize for interruptions. I realize it's difficult when we're in different places, but we do have Member Fairhead on our RTS. He would like to ask a question before we move further. Thank you.
Okay, and I see through my amended notes here that there will be a presentation by Terry Rickert and Jennifer Weinman. So we'll go through that. So just trying to get caught up with all the new notes here. So first of all, Councillor Sinclair, you had your hand up.
Yes, I don't know if I should have had a few questions. Is this the best time, or should we wait for, is there a presentation?
I would wait for the presentation, Ian, and just see where we are. Maybe some of your questions will be answered. So why don't we do that first? And then I see also
Okay.
Neil
Good.
is on board. Neil, did you want to ask a question?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a follow-on to any new business. I've got 2 motions I'd like to put in later on based on content that's in the 2 IT presentations. So should I mention them now, or should I introduce them at the end of the meeting? Therefore follow-on actions.
That was breaking up for me. Neil, are you still there?
Yes, I'll do it a little more slowly. I have 2 follow-on action requests, motions, I guess, following looking at the material on the 2 IT presentations today and having had a short discussion yesterday with Dr. Weinman and Sean Baird, Dr. Baird. Should I introduce them now or at the end of the meeting?
I would introduce it at the end, and just to let you know, you are, at least for me, you're breaking up.
Thank you. I will see what I can do.
Okay, so why don't we do this? Why don't we go through the first report, and Terry and Jennifer, if you can stand by and get ready to do your report.
Thank you, Councillor Starr. Good morning to the committee members and those joining us. Terry and I are here today to walk through the results of the audit of the traffic signal operations and maintenance contract management. Next slide, please. The region's traffic signals in the City of Mississauga and Brampton are operated and maintained by the cities on the region's behalf. This is done through an agreement between the region and each of the cities. To monitor how the traffic signals are being operated and maintained, a number of informal processes have been implemented by staff at the region. There is an opportunity to strengthen oversight of the compliance to the agreement and evaluate the city's performance through formalizing processes for oversight and performance evaluation. Next slide, please. During the presentation this morning, I will cover the audit objective and the observations. Terry will speak to the management action plans for each of the two observations. Then I will provide the audit conclusion and we will open up the floor for questions. Next slide, please. For this audit, the focus was to look at whether the region has effective contract management controls in place for overseeing and monitoring the agreements between the region and the City of Mississauga and the City of Brampton. The audit was not assessing the city's compliance with the operations and maintenance agreements. It was a look at the processes within the region's control. And the audit did not include the region's agreement with the town of Caledon related to traffic signals. As in the case of the town of Caledon, the region's traffic signals in the town are not operated and maintained by the town. So there is not a similar arrangement that would call for us to be doing a contract management audit. Next slide, please. For the first audit observation, there is a need to develop and implement formal processes to oversight and monitor that the cities are complying with the obligations and terms of the operations and maintenance agreements with the region. Processes should include ensuring documentation of this monitoring activity is retained to be able to support that the region has carried out the appropriate oversight and due diligence of compliance with the agreement. I will now turn over the mic to Terry, who will speak about the work the Transportation Division plans to undertake to address this audit observation. Terry?
Thank you, Jennifer. Through the chair, just as we get started, I'd also like to introduce Sean Carrick, the participating program manager who's here to assist us today with questions. So hello, Sean. Okay, so about this program. So the Traffic Signal Operations and Maintenance Service Agreement are essentially contracts between the region and the cities of Brampton and Mississauga. And as such, these contracts operate differently than traditional vendor contracts. The agreements specify that the cities will operate the region's traffic signal system on our behalf. The region system includes more than 400 traffic signals within the boundaries of the cities, as well as various other components such as electrical components, signage, pavement markings, etc. The traffic signals, which are the control signals, which are the actual traffic signal heads, are operated based on instructions that come either from a master control box situated at the intersection, which is part of the scope of this contract, maintenance of, or a central computer at the city's traffic control center. So the purpose of these agreements is to simplify management of traffic signals within each municipality because the local municipalities are already resourced to manage the local traffic signal systems. The region leverages that capacity to include our own infrastructure and thereby avoid duplication of effort and realize some economies of scale. The region's Public Works Transportation Division oversees this agreement, and our role as the region is to ensure that the obligations of the contract are met, as well as to provide the base timing for lights, review the maintenance reports submitted by the cities, forward complaints from the public, and assist with any change requests, such as the addition of an advanced left, as an example. So since the program began in 2015, informal processes and procedures have been developed and put in place with both cities. However, as indicated by the audit report, the next step for us to mature this program is to document these business processes in partnership with the cities in a way that clearly sets out how we're going to monitor the requirements of the contracts and ensure that the obligations of all parties are being met. A working group within transportation has now been established to review and itemize the specific terms within the contracts and to document formal processes that will help us monitor and also keep records of compliance as well as areas for improvement. Specifically, as an outcome of this exercise, our team will develop a workflow that will provide clear direction to staff on what activities need to take place to comply with the agreement and what records must be kept to document that those activities are taking place. And this, of course, will help demonstrate our respective due diligence in maintaining the traffic signal system overall. Our workflow will address requirements for things like operations and maintenance, record keeping, adherence to regional standards, requirements for troubleshooting and monitoring, and providing the region access to the central control signal system as needed. It's important to note that work is underway across the region at large to build capacity and strengthen contract oversight processes. And this corporate effort will certainly help support our program efforts, and we look forward to establishing those more formal processes. I think it's also important to mention that these agreements form the basis of our partnership with the cities as it relates to the traffic signal system, and we will continue to work closely with our local counterparts to develop and implement these changes for our mutual benefits. And I do want to highlight that we have really great working relationships with our counterparts, and we look forward to working with them on this project. That's all for me. Jennifer, anything further on this slide?
No, I think that covers it all. Thanks, Terry. We can go to the next slide, please. For the audit observation related to performance metrics, there is an opportunity to regularly evaluate the city's performance in maintaining and operating the region's traffic signals through tracking and monitoring of specific measures set out in the agreement, as well as by developing a process that includes the use of other performance metrics. This would include information taken from the oversight and monitoring activities discussed in the first audit observation, as well as perhaps things such as meetings to discuss the performance metrics. I will turn it over to Terry now, and then she can speak to management's plans for action related to this audit observation. Terry?
Thank you, Jennifer. When I first read the second finding, I found for me it seemed very closely related to the first, but I think the nuanced difference is that the first finding asks, are our partners doing the thing and can we prove it? Whereas this finding asks, how well are they doing the thing and can it be done better? So within the terms of the contract, there are requirements to meet key performance metrics such as turnaround time for addressing complaints and inquiries, requirements for maintenance to be completed within certain timeframes, or the number of progression runs that should take place each year. So a progression run is when a person drives straight along a corridor to see how many lights they're stopped at, and then makes timing adjustments so that drivers will hit as many green lights as possible, the idea being to keep traffic moving. So actions such as this are included within the contract and have metrics and requirements associated with them. At present, although these requirements are specified within the contract and metrics are being reported, we haven't been using a formal process to track performance and prompt further action as need be. And this, of course, is in part because of our strong working relationship with our partners and the informal processes that have developed to date. However, what we've learned from the audit process is that the next step for us to mature this process is to clearly define and document those performance metrics, as this will help us demonstrate our due diligence in the event of an incident or an outside inquiry about our practices. We anticipate addressing these findings in 3 stages. First, we'll work with the cities to clearly define a suite of performance metrics using the agreement as our guide. We'll develop a formal process for reporting these metrics and how we will take action to address opportunities for improvement. And finally, we'll develop a workflow for staff that clearly sets out the steps they need to take to manage the contract in this respect. And the workflow will include things like how performance data will be obtained and reported and by whom, the content and frequency of summary reports that need to be generated, with whom and how often the results need to be reviewed, and the process we're going to use together to talk about opportunities for improvements. So in sum total, and in consideration of both findings, we anticipate that these management action plans will be developed and implemented by the end of 2021. Jennifer, anything further on this slide?
No, nothing further from me. Thank you, Terry. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, as discussed, there is a need to develop formal processes and strengthen the oversight and performance evaluation of the cities in their compliance with and their work under the agreements. The Audit Division has reviewed the action plans developed by Terry and her team and feels confident they will address the risks noted for each audit observation. Next slide, please. In closing, I want to thank you for your time, and Terry and I are both here and happy to address any questions you may have.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Just a quick question. This is the first time we've taken a look at this particular area.
Thank you, Councillor Starr. This is actually the second time that we have conducted an audit in this area. We conducted an audit in 2010, I believe that it was, and we committed at that time to come back and do an audit after there had been an opportunity to implement the changes that were coming out of that audit. And so we did that, and we feel quite satisfied with what we've seen in terms of the controls in place in the progression since the last audit, and then with the implementation of these action plans, there'll be a good solid formal process in place.
Just while I'm looking for the speakers, ballpark, what are these contracts? What's the value of them?
That is information that I would have to get from staff, unless Terry has an answer with her available right now. I can get back to the committee with that.
That's fine. Okay, now I'm starting to see the speakers lined up. Councillor Sinclair, I know you were first.
Yes, thank you. I had a question. Who controls the traffic lights on the provincial highways in Caledon, Highway 10 and 9?
Through the chair, this is Jennifer Wyman here. I'm going to direct that question to the transportation division to answer, as that was not part of the work we did in the audit.
Thank you, Jennifer. Through you, Mr. Chair, the region controls those on MTO's behalf.
Okay, thank you. And I assume that Peel has primary responsibility for traffic signals all over Peel, and there must be some act that specifies that, and that there's a provision for delegation to local municipalities. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding is that it's not so much a matter of delegation, but a contract. So, for example, if it could also be such that the region has a contractor do this work, but instead, based on the economies of scale, it makes more sense to depend on the local municipalities as our quote-unquote contractor or vendor in this case. A little different than a delegated authority.
Okay, then Peel has liability for the correct installation, maintenance, and design of traffic signals in Peel. Is that it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's my understanding.
Okay, and does that come through a particular piece of legislation?
I would like to call on Sean to help me with that question if I could. Sean, can you speak to the relation?
Yeah, so the responsibility is Sean Carrick here. Thank you very much. The responsibility for maintenance of infrastructure lies with the municipalities under the roads in which they have jurisdiction. That being said, as Terry had mentioned, it would be similar to contracting out to Guild, who is the current maintenance contractor. The maintenance is being undertaken by the cities on the region's behalf, although we have the responsibility to do the maintenance, and it is our infrastructure.
Okay, I guess maybe you could send us a little information memo on exactly what legislation makes Peel the upper tier government in control of the traffic signals all over Peel. I'm still a little murky on that, so thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Next on my list, I see Councillor Fonseca.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for this audit and this report and the recommendations. I'm happy to move it if nobody else has. I think it's extremely important. And the recommendations of tracking and having the formalized data in place is really important in terms of moving ahead with the action plan. So I'm very supportive of the outcomes of this report and the recommendations. I did have a couple of questions. So does this include? So oftentimes when you're looking at traffic signals, operations, maintenance, control systems, and you're in a construction zone, that construction could take place over 1, 2, 3, 4 seasons. And how the initial traffic control signals or the permanent control signals that were in place pre-construction may have been operated or looked at or maintained in one way, whereas the temporary control signals that may be put in place for the duration of a construction period how are they monitored, or will this include traffic signals that are in place in a temporary manner due to construction, and performance metrics around that, and how those construction zones would be managed?
Through the chair, whenever intersections are in construction, typically that comes back to the region for management. Usually, if there's a road widening going on, the region will complete the design and take care of the construction and the capital costs for the interim and ultimate signals. Once it is out of construction and it goes back into maintenance, then it gets handed back over to the cities to maintain on our behalf.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. The next thing is, will the managing action plans or performance metrics include at intersections the pedestrian signals and the cross-ride cyclist signals and pedestrian pavement markings, or is it only the main traffic signals and road pavement markings?
So through the chair, yes, that includes the cycling signals as well. They're run by the same controller and are considered part of the traffic control at the intersection.
Okay, so that's good to hear. You did mention, you answered my question that timelines, there will be timelines in terms of the complaints and reporting system, and in the performance metrics, there will be timelines included in that. So you answered that. And then I guess my one final comment is that it mentions here in the report that the scope of the audit does not or did not include Vision Zero framework. However, in terms of, well, for both the region and the local municipalities, I believe every municipality has passed a Vision Zero framework. So, and based on the timing of when this audit was completed, I can see that Vision Zero was not necessarily included. Should I guess looking to clerk, like in my mind, a Vision Zero framework or an audit around intersections is extremely important, especially moving forward with intersections and traffic signals and pedestrian signals and the design of intersections and how they are maintained, whether it's by the region or the local municipalities, is extremely important moving forward. So would I need to put forward a recommendation that an audit of specifically around intersections in Vision Zero be looked at, or I don't know, what would be the best approach to that? I just think the Vision Zero framework and design of intersections and signaling at the intersections is extremely important moving forward. So if it's not within the scope of this audit and performance metrics and reporting and action plans, I don't know where would be the appropriate place to bring that up and bring that forward. If somebody could comment on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, could I offer a comment? I'd like to suggest that we take that back as direction and look at including that as part of our future audit plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next on my list, Mr.
Excuse
Zuberi.
me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
It's Jennifer Weinman. I just wanted to speak a little further to Terry's point. I would suggest that be a report, as Terry mentioned, that her team brings back to the committee, and then in a future we can look at doing another audit in the area of traffic signals and related to the contract and the inclusion of Vision Zero at that time. But because we just finished up an audit, we should give them some time to work through the changes they are proposing, and then come back to the group after they've had an opportunity to do that. But in the meantime, a report from Terry and her team would be appropriate.
That sounds like a good solution. Councillor Fonseca?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on. Next on my list, Mr. Zuberi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question or two regarding the performance metrics. So I wanted to know how the performance metrics have been performing so far, like what results have been coming out of them. And also, Terry mentioned that there are some updates that the department is planning to those performance metrics. So what exactly triggered those updates? Was it an issue with the performance metrics being reported, or is it just enhancements?
Through the chair, the performance metrics themselves we're not looking to update those. Those are contained within the maintenance contract, and what we're planning on doing is using those as a basis to more formally track and do a bit more of an analysis into those to look for areas of improvements. Currently, we're working well with the cities, and the performance metrics are being met but tracked informally. So this is through kind of regular meetings, conversations, emails, but there's no formal process in place to do any sort of analytic work on those metrics to see how we can do things better.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And next on my list is Councilor Rapp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Sorry we were a little late. Councilor Dasco and I were coming from a different meeting. I guess this always, for me, it comes back to what are the things we absolutely need to do. Both Mississauga and Brampton are, mature cities, have their own advanced transportation management system. When it comes to traffic signals and traffic controls, it seems to be we spend an awful lot of time as a region trying to provide oversight and micromanage this, when at the end of the day, Mississauga and Brampton can ably manage the traffic signal piece. I know I don't want to get into a big, long, drawn-out discussion, as we have many times on the arterial road rationalization, but it seems to me it's like lower tier municipality, you should be responsible for 6 inches above the ground and up, and Peel, you should be responsible for the capital projects and the design of, in coordination with, for 6 inches and below the ground. So I just worry we're getting into these, the management systems, performance metrics, a lot of make work projects, when we could really, really simplify this, specifically within Mississauga and Brampton on the traffic signal piece, because they're not going to, they want to make sure that the system is an integrated one and make sure traffic is moving. So I'm just, where are we on that? I just, can somebody help me out here? Maybe I woke up on the wrong side of the bed today, but I'm a little cranky.
Through the chair, this is...
Oh, sorry, I could, go ahead.
This is Jennifer Weinman. From the perspective of how this came to be on the audit plan, the traffic signals are, that are the regions, are legally the region's obligation, and there is legal liability and such attached with those. So when we were looking at what are higher risk areas, we noted that the traffic signal operation and maintenance is agreed out to be undertaken by a different party, which in this case is the cities. And so we were looking at what the region is doing to apply their due diligence, because they are the region's assets, and there's an attached legal liability, so there's an attached risk. So that is how it came to be on the plan from an audit perspective. But we did not look into the legal structuring of the responsibility for the signals. And then I'll turn it over to Terry.
Can I request that we do that? Maybe it's time, so we're not spending a whole lot of time, money, effort, and people resources on this type of thing when it can be ably managed and even liability assumed. I'm not putting words in their mouth, by the lower tier municipalities. It just seems like I'm not looking at full rationalization here, but just within the urban boundaries of Mississauga and Brampton.
Through the chair, I don't believe from the perspective of an internal audit that we would be able to comment on the legal structure and appropriateness of liability over the traffic signals. I would have to defer that to someone else.
Can I provide staff direction to come back to perhaps a Peel Council meeting at some point in the future with a report on that? Mr. Chair, would that be in order?
I would think so. I mean, we're here to look at all aspects of the operation and how well it's done. So, yeah, I would think that's appropriate to ask for that.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, may I offer a thought as well?
Sure, Terry.
Sure.
Okay, so you mentioned about like duplication of management or unnecessary work. So I think one of the things that I came to realize through this process is that the reason this work is being done is really to protect the region and or the cities. So in the event of an incident, there is naturally questions about whether or not the maintenance of the signal system has been adequate and appropriate. And so in any case, whether the accountability is held at the regional level or the city level, all of these things need to take place because this is both our work plan for making sure that the due diligence is on the system is completed and documented, and also our evidence when things go wrong, that those things have happened and we can demonstrate that they've happened. So it's I think no matter who the accountability sits with, these actions are good and sound advice from the audit group to protect the region and cities at large.
Okay, maybe some help from Patrick O'Connor. I see that he's asked to speak on this, I'm sure, on this matter. So Patrick, you're on.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We can certainly bring back at the committee's request advice on the rather complicated system that's in place for jurisdiction on roads as between the province, region, and local municipalities. But the advice that you've just received is essentially very sound advice. No matter how we structure within the flexibility that we may have for delegation, however we structure the legal responsibility, it inevitably comes back to the region if there is an accident, liability is being asserted. So we do have due diligence obligations regardless of how we arrange matters legally. And for that reason, the kinds of measures that are being recommended to you or identified in the audit are appropriate measures that the region would want to see in place in any event.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. And what I'm looking for is to figure out ways to uncomplicate this. And I know that Commissioner Farr wants to speak, so I'll let him, or Mr. Chair, I'm sure you'll let him.
Thanks, through the chair, and thanks for your question, Councillor Raz, and for Terry and for Patrick for your advice. If I can try and rephrase the question back to you to make sure we're bringing back to you what it is you've asked. Several years ago, we did go through that arterial road rationalization process, and council made some decisions on different parts of the work and who would be doing what. And one of the things that did come out of that was a real desire for the region and the three locals to work together on efficiencies, business efficiencies on a grand scale and business efficiencies on a smaller scale, which are things we do every day. Perhaps what a good thing we could do is bring back an update on behalf of all three locals and ourselves of what we've done to date on those efficiencies. I don't want to poke the bear too much here, but I'm quite happy to bring back in due course. It'll take us a little more than a month to come up with it, but
yeah, no rush on this. Maybe early in the new year. Yeah,
on behalf of that working team, an update of what we've been working on, what we've been able to put in place, and maybe what some of the things are. We've maybe hit some roadblocks and other things, and work through with council on what's worth working on, what isn't worth working on, and go from there. How would that work?
Okay. That would be great if we can take a sober second look at what was done a few years ago, and perhaps it is time for a refresh to look at those responsibilities, especially now that I know in Mississauga, and I've toured our advanced what is it called? The Advanced Transportation Management System at the city, and in terms of technology and how far advanced we are compared to when those perhaps efficiencies and those decisions were made a few years ago. Things have come a long way. So at least on I'm specific to traffic signals. I'm not talking about the entire capital budget and all those. It's specific to the traffic signal piece.
Thank you. Understood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I see that I think staff understand the direction, so that's great.
Mr. Chair, if I might, just for clarification, I would propose that the legal framework advice that's been requested would form part of that report.
Oh, of course. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Dasco, I saw your hand waving.
thank you through the chair. I would just like to actually echo what Councillor Raz has to say, because I've had a couple of opportunities since coming on council to ask some of these questions, and having some up-to-date, readily available information would be extremely helpful. So thanks for the request. Okay,
thank you. Any other further questions, comments? Seeing none, Councillor Fonseca has moved that we receive the report and presentation. All those in favor? And direction, of course. Aye. That we've talked about, yes. And all those in favor? Aye. Go ahead. Yeah, I see that. I see enough hands to say, okay, it's passed. 5.2 is the Information Technology Security Assessment, and we have a presentation by Arthur McCallick. Arthur, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair Starr. Chairman Starr. Good morning, everyone. My name is Arthur McCallick, and I'm the IT Security Advisor in the IT Operations Division of Digital and Information Services, and I lead a team of individuals who on a daily basis are responsible for identity access and security management. This covers account creation, termination, user role assignments, access permissions, and mitigation of security threats. Next slide, please. Let's just start with what is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, in simple terms, is about applying technologies, processes, and practices to protect corporate assets against threats posed by external and internal adversaries. Next slide, please. Here are some of the stats that we were able to collect for the month of July. Now, these are averages. So as you can see, we've blocked about 86% of emails being sent to the region of Peel as spam, malware, viruses, bulk emails that we don't really necessarily need to see, as well as phishing emails. We also blocked about 2% of all the websites daily. And we also ran through a phishing campaign, and these are some of the stats that you can see here. Now, Regional Peel has experienced rise in cyber attacks in the last 12 months. External actors tried to unsuccessfully deliver malware and remote access terminal tools that allow attacker to control targeted systems. Regional Peel has completed its first major internal target email phishing campaign this past summer, with its content revolving around current issue that affects us all, which is COVID-19 pandemic. Based on the result from this phishing campaign, a report to executive leadership team will be completed, recommending that cybersecurity training becomes mandatory for all employees and contract workers. Today, it's not. Next slide, please. When implemented correctly within an organization, cybersecurity can reduce the risk of system compromises or information breaches, but it cannot completely eliminate it. In 2019, we have seen a number of hospitals and government agencies in both the US and Canada that fell to ransomware attacks, bringing those agencies' operations to a screeching halt. What was learned through these ordeals is that the biggest cause of cyber attack for the organization is productivity. The risk of cyber attack is not always financial. In the past few years, government-funded groups were used more often to disrupt other countries' financial sectors, increase surveillance, and influence certain outcomes using very intricate tools. Next slide, please. During the COVID-19, a majority of employees at Peel started working from their homes. Working from home or public places on more permanent basis, introduces additional risks. So things like, home or public networks are by default less secure. The attackers will always try the weakest link first. Increased phishing attacks around current issues like COVID-19. Family members allowed to use corporate computers. Our computers are in somebody's home, and we have necessarily no control on how these computers are being used. Technical issues could prevent that timely installation of security updates. From around physical security, computer left unattended, allowing for unauthorized access. As well as employees not being aware of some of the security risks. And as I told you, cybersecurity training is currently not mandatory at the region of Peel, which will shortly change. But that's part of the risk that we also were looking at. In most of these risks, risks were already addressed. In the case of cybersecurity training, will be addressed very soon. Next slide, please. So Region of Peel based its security and risk management on two industry-based standards and frameworks. International Organization for Standardization, which is ISO 27000 series, and National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is a NIST 800 series. To assess organization posture around security controls and protection while keeping the two standards in mind, Region of Peel chose to adopt Center for Internet Security, 20 Critical Controls, and Cloud Security Alliance, Cloud Control Matrix. Both of these provide more focused areas when dealing with protection controls and compliance. Next slide, please. We took those two areas, 20 critical controls and cloud controls matrix, and used them to create what we call layered security controls. Layered security controls, or what is more known in the security field as defense in depth methodology, helps to lower a chance of successful attack by preventing cyber attacker to remain undetected while continuing to steal or actively monitor sensitive information being exchanged between two parties in the organization. Region of Peel is also moving to adopt a zero trust model, meaning don't trust anyone by default. This is because we're not only concerned about outsider, but also insider threats like employees or even contractors. Next slide, please. Here are some of the examples of security controls or processes used at the Region of Peel. Now, these are just very little examples, but I'd like to just show it to you of how they're being used. Security systems, so asset control, sorry about that. Security systems by applying system build procedures to reduce the chance of system misconfiguration, which then pose threat to information, and also analyzing and retaining audit logs for compliance. Identity access controls are probably one of the most important cybersecurity controls. User access credentials, when compromised, are catastrophic, as these allow attacker to access potentially any sensitive information, such as personal health information. This is where Region of Peel spent a lot of time developing and updating in the last 2 years. Machine learning, which is part of this particular system, helps us identify abnormal employee behavior that doesn't fit employee assigned role. Endpoint protection is really about protecting servers, about protecting our internal systems, as well as cloud-based systems, and as well as client systems as well. So it's about protecting, implementing enterprise-grade anti-malware, antivirus, anti-spyware solutions that use built-in machine learning that look at behaviors of given program and the threat that it poses to corporate assets. Vulnerability and advanced threat protection. We've implemented what's called threat risk assessment processes to be completed prior to system moving to production environment. Use of automated security weakness hunting tools, which allow us greater visibility to anything and everything that is happening within our network or within our infrastructure. Next slide, please. Oh, okay, sorry about that. Security patch management. So system with the ability to dynamically inventory applications and operating systems and then apply missing updates to prevent risk of system and information compromises. Use of security patch management audit as part of the compliance reporting. These are kind of two use cases, how we're using these controls. Content filtering, preventing attacker from sending phishing emails to employees and inspecting attachments for web links, as well as any other content that may be problematic in a way that we can protect it. Regular controls apply standards-based encryption to sensitive data being stored on a device or being exchanged between two systems or users. Use of secondary form authentication besides just a password. Cybersecurity training. Cybersecurity training is delivered through cloud-based learning management system, using internal phishing campaigns to educate employees around dangers of social engineering, which is a technique used by adversaries to steal information or money. Next slide, please. So here's high-level visual of Region of Peel security controls. In the past few years, Region of Peel worked hard on modernizing cybersecurity controls that allow us to discover threats, proactively manage them. Majority of our tools, about 90% of them, are now located in the cloud, or to some degree are hybrid type of technology. The control in orange, I believe it is orange, is slated for future implementation that we're hoping to implement in mid-2021, as it has an enterprise-wide impact. Next slide, please. So security maturity analysis was conducted in March and April of 2019 using CIS's 20 critical control security controls. These controls are a recommended set of actions for cybersecurity defense that provide specific and actionable ways to stop today's most pervasive and dangerous attacks. And principal benefit of the controls is that they prioritize the focus on a smaller number of actions with a high payoff results. As part of the assessment, external vendor has completed a mapping of Region of Peel technology controls to CSI's 20 cybersecurity controls for security domains. Then provide a Region of Peel of how these controls align with security best practices. Next, vendor reviewed existing security policies and practices. Interviews were scheduled with Peel subject matter experts that covered network, application, services, and client systems areas to be able to provide additional verifications. Vendor completed system and network scans to look for vulnerabilities or weaknesses and potential threats that may affect underlying systems hosting corporate information. Based on the collected information, vendor has then assigned security maturity score. Overall report also included recommendations on how to increase Peel's overall security maturity score. And we also planning another third-party security assessment later in 2021. Next slide, please. So Region of Peel has achieved 42% maturity score. Are we happy with this percentage? No, but this gives us a baseline and room for continuous improvement. Based on the review findings, we need to engage all Region of Peel stakeholders in their remediation activities to increase the overall security maturity level. For example, information classification protection was flagged by 2019 audit as a necessary step to provide access to information on a need-to-know basis. Next slide, please. I would like to turn your attention to the status indicators that are located in the top right corner. This will allow you to see which security assessment findings were either addressed by their completion indicator or are still ongoing, or we are not started or have not been started yet. Missing status indicates that the given area has not been yet put into active remediation plan. Although Region of Peel may have scored above average in certain critical security control areas, it is important for us to continue to improve upon these moving forward. For example, for continuous vulnerability management, for example, we have now created a process where all weaknesses are being captured and reported daily. We're able to provide compliance status to support personnel when security updates were not applied correctly to the systems or applications. This removes a false sense of security related to automated security patch management processes. Next slide, please. To address areas with low maturity scores, and we have them as well, Peel has created a phased approach. Phase 1, which is already ongoing, deals with controls we can quickly address. Creating a security bubble around Peel services that can be used by our residents or are being used by our residents and employees. We move to user type of services like content delivery networks and web application firewalling to mitigate risk exposure around these services. Addressing configuration-related problems due to human factor, but by automating the processes through the use of configuration templates or technology and compliance policies. In the case of phase 2, PL will review a number of older and some of the unsupported corporate applications through already established state of good repair program to prioritize them for either removal, upgrade, or replacement. This phase will be more time consuming, as there is a number of these applications in our environment. Next slide, please. Vulnerability assessment, which was completed as part of the penetration testing by third-party vendor, identified a number of issues with older applications. For example, a system used at Peel to manage corporate electronic records were identified to be vulnerable to a number of different application-based weaknesses. By moving the system through the State of Good Repair program, activities will be developed to migrate information to a cloud-based technology faster and in a more controlled fashion. Next slide, please. We also have seen some missing. Vendor has reported some missing or inaccurate policy statements. Number of new policy statements were created, and some of them have been provided to you here as an examples. Other existing IT technology policies are currently being updated, as there are a lot of them. Documentation, from a documentation perspective, some systems lack the design detail which affected proper application of cybersecurity controls. Some threat assessment recommendations that were created were not put into place entirely. Again, this has now been addressed by configuration and security automation tools. The tools today use templates containing settings that apply uniformly to all systems. Next slide, please. Sorry about that. And here I'd like to show you a work plan. So next few slides is really about the work plan that we are kind of engaged for the last year. We're going to be doing this year, next year, and then the year after. So the two first ones, what we've done is we've created a cybersecurity awareness training last year. We've completed that. We've completed it this year by releasing a lot more modules from a security training perspective, and we're going to be doing that next year and then a year after. So these are more repetitive type of activities that we'll continue doing. Same thing with phishing campaigns. What we've done is we've also created a number of missing policy statements. Again, those came from the latest security audit that we underwent. We developed security incident response program to address on how Peel will deal with future system compromises due to external or internal attacks. Next slide, please. We've implemented new next generation endpoint protection solutions. So protection for servers, clients, systems, which was developed which are hosting corporate applications and information. We've deployed or we've operationalized a security incident and management solution to provide more thorough reporting and ability to retain those incidents for the purpose of analyzing the data around internal and external threats and to comply with external privacy regulations. We've created automated previously manual system build processes and enhanced those with automated compliance policy checks. In the past 2 years, Peel has modernized the use of cybersecurity tools. And as I indicated in previously, 90% of these tools are now fully cloud-based. This allows us to stay on top of newly released vulnerabilities and weaknesses and threats, which in turn allows us to identify and deal with incidences proactively and in a timely fashion. Next slide, please. We started work around enhancing mobile device protection, things like smartphones, and we will continue that in the next year. We started working on updating existing policy statements that were identified by the 2019 third-party security assessment, and unfortunately, that will have to be pushed into the next year as well. State of good repair is a catalyst for good work that is necessary to address underlying threats and risks posed by old application operating systems still running today in Peel's own enterprise. And state of good repair, we started in 2019, we'll continue this year, and we'll continue next as well. State of good repair will help to deal with technical deficiency around missing application updates, which today cannot be delivered due to existing application compatibility and support issues. Next slide, please. We operationalized security incident response plan. We assign roles to individuals that will be participating in the future security incidences. We've enhanced regulatory compliance controls by enabling encryption on as many older internal systems as we could, and as we can, that are still kind of in use today. Continue improving CIS critical control areas to increase overall security maturity. That will be something that we will be completing this year as well as next year. Continue delivering new cybersecurity training content to employees. In June of this year, 4 additional modules were published to all employees to address securely working from home idea as part of COVID-19 response. Later in 21, Peel will be completing a full follow-up IT security assessment to confirm that corporation is moving in the right direction when it comes to cybersecurity. Next slide, please. And, that's pretty much the end of my presentation. If you guys have any questions with regards to that, we will be able to answer that.
Thank you very much, and very complete report. Mr. Zuberi.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Arthur, for that presentation. And it's a very important topic, and I think it was covered quite comprehensively in that presentation. A couple of questions that I had. The first one was about the part where the testing was conducted by sending employees phishing emails to see whether they click on the link or whether they enter any of their information within that link. I think that's a very good approach, and I've seen other organizations and corporations do that as well. And I think it's important in the sense that as much security as we have, but if an employee does end up clicking on an email that is actually a phishing email, it would essentially bypass all of that security, and systems could end up being compromised. So my question is that how much is the region focusing on training employees to identify such emails and training those employees that actually did click on those emails and designing some training programs and creating awareness? What's the focus on that, and what are the steps that are planned towards that aspect?
Sure. So cyber training specific issues. We know that today our cybersecurity training is currently not mandatory. So we will be changing that focus to be more mandatory type of process that every employee will need to adhere to, right? And phishing specific problem is being addressed by some of that training that we've already made published to the employees within the region of Peel. But I agree, we need to probably put more emphasis on our training and how we communicate that training to all our employees and contractors who may be working on behalf of region of Peel on our network. How are we going to be, we've put a lot of controls in place that hopefully will identify these things. And through the phishing campaign, we actually captured information about who clicked on a specific URLs, who provided credentials even. And at that point, we will be reaching out to those individuals who made that choice. And we will be providing them with those additional ways that they can improve on.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that's a very important step, and it's good to see that there is a focus on that. My other question was regarding a slide which had the critical security controls maturity score. So the region of Peel scored 42%.
Yes.
And it said that the current municipality sector average is 39. So with regards to that sector average, so which municipalities are part of that? Is it GTA or is it beyond?
Yes.
And how current is that average score as well?
Sure. So I believe what was done is there was an average provided for all the Ontario municipalities when it comes to, or similar type of a sector. So it's a government sector. So, City of Toronto, City of Mississauga, City of Brampton will also part of that specific average. Now, some of these municipalities may be higher up, maybe lower. But the average was basically the 39%, and that's what was provided to us by the vendor.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Okay. Thank you. Fairhead, next on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for that presentation, Arthur. Very interesting. I have a question on more the supply side. A lot of everything you were talking about was working with end users and obviously bringing their discipline up. But a number of the findings also suggest that some of the issues start deeper into the development side. So one thing I don't understand is what proportion of applications and Sept systems are homegrown versus supplied by outside vendors or contractors who we have perhaps less control over?
Yeah, so
is that something you have addressed in this? Sorry.
Sure, yes. So based on my knowledge of the entire system, probably about 40% are homegrown, 30 to 40% are homegrown, 60 to 70% are actually something that was purchased commercially. However, those commercial specific softwares were not kept up to date for a number of different reasons.
Which leads to my second question, which is, you talked a lot about training of end users, etc., cybersecurity, but is there also significant training going into our support staff, our operations staff, etc., to make them very carefully aware of some of the challenges which this just call it this flood, or could I even say almost pandemic of attacks, puts on their shoulders, as well as the other members of Peel? How much training are you actually being able to do there?
Yeah, so in 2018, we've actually released 20 different modules, IT security modules, to the IT operations side of IT to make it for them to actually go through them and actually learn some of the best practices and some of the things that they should be aware when dealing with when supporting our clients, when dealing with third parties. So that process will also continue this year. We haven't completed anything last year with respect to that, but we will continue about educating our IT security personnel about the dangers of social engineering and different vectors of attacks that may be coming their way.
Thank you. My last question. When I saw the 42%, let's talk about the maturity. I thought, what's in the other 58% that we're not doing? And Director Baird put me right and said, well, nobody gets 100%. So my question for you is, what do you think is the level achieved by the very best municipalities? And what would be a reasonable target for Peel to achieve, say, in the next 2 and in 5 years? So we have some idea of how fast our progress is against what is a reasonable target.
So from my perspective, my target for, let's say, next year would be about 55 or higher, right, percentage-wise of security maturity. Region of Peel is doing fairly well on some of the areas, but then the average has been lowered because we were not doing so well in the others. So from my perspective, going forward, I would expect that Region of Peel will score much better, have a much better score next year, and the year after that. So in the case of any sort of government agency, I think pretty much, what we can achieve as an organization, and and that is if we somehow be able to push and get rid of all these legacy applications, all these risks are associated with them. If we can move towards more a modern type of applications, web-based, where we can control these security of these applications much better, we can actually attain 70 to 80% without any issues.
Thank you. One last question, if I may, Mr. Chair. And this is a bit nitpicky. I'm looking at shall we say, the lesser findings, and I'm looking at incident response and management. And is this a pure security incident process, or
Yes.
is it part of the more general incident management process? And if they're separate, is there any advantage to actually saying it's better to build it in than try and put it on later? What's the relationship between the generic incident management I know we must have and instant response to a security instance?
So what we've created so far is how we want to streamline how we respond to a threat. Whether it's compromise, whether it's something that's coming our way that we don't understand, and we can bring all the necessary people to actually deal with this incident. Right. So we're not struggling. We're not trying to, find ways of how we're going to be dealing with it when that incident happens. We want to be ready, right? But there is a bigger, possibly need for a risk management, a corporate risk management strategy, and that came up in a secondary type of assessments that we undertook last year, I believe, and some of the recommendations will be coming out of that specific risk assessment.
Thank you. That was a very useful presentation, and I hand my time back, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And I have two quick ones here. If I didn't know anything about computers and cyber attacks and all the rest of it, and somebody was asking a question, what's the main reason that we have to have security? Why do people phish? Why do they attack us? What's the threats? Why is there hacking? I mean, what's the benefit? I mean, to me, I thought it was always to upset a system or money. I mean, what in I don't know, a minute or less? What's the real reasons why we're so concerned?
Yeah, so there are a lot of incentives, right? So, but major ones are financial. Phishing are used to, remove money from enterprises fairly quickly. It's a quick score for cyber criminals, and it's not just government agency, but it's also private companies or private enterprises that are being affected by this every single day, right? But since probably last year, as I indicated in my presentation, Region of Peel has seen state-run type of campaigns against Canadian type of government agencies. And we've seen that on the Region of Peel side as well, where at some point we had to block some of the countries from trying to access some of the services, because we looked at one vector of attack, and it was it was not really sitting very well with us. So we did confirm that with our third-party vendor, and the suggestion was just for them to kind of go away and kind of secure our information and not allow them to apply any and bring on none of our services down. That was the only way we could actually fend them off. And we've seen that we've seen that more often now. It's not necessarily all financial benefit to these attackers. It's also trying to bring the services down, trying to influence some of the things and steal, and most of the time steal the information that belongs to corporations like Region of Peel.
Okay, thank you. And the last one is that we have 17 items that we have in our work plan, and we put years on them, 2019 to 21. To me, when I see all the various areas that we're working on and improving, and there seems to me that's constant. If I put the dates on there, say 2022 to 2024, are a lot of these same items repeats? Do we go through a cycle? Are we constantly upgrading, updating?
Yes, so some of these activities may be repetitive. Some of them will end. Right, they will be every maybe on the every year maybe at least once a year we'll kind of review them and see whether the controls fit the need or fit what we need to protect the information. If you think about security changes not on a yearly basis, sometimes on a monthly basis. And with the advent of cloud technologies, these things change almost daily. So we as practitioners, we're looking at all these things that are happening within the industry, and then seeing what else can we do from our perspective that would be cost effective, that will increase the overall security and posture of our systems, and at the end of the day protect both employee and residents' information, which we're entrusted to actually protect.
Okay, thank you. I think that answers that. I see no one else on the board. Could I have a mover? Councillor Sinclair? All those in favor? Carried. Just want to remind everybody that we still have 5 more items, and we can go past 12:30 without a motion. So I guess we are good for 4 or 5 o'clock anyway. So I see Councillor Rath smiling. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I do have a 1 o'clock meeting, so just let me know.
And then that's why I'm bringing this up, because I know other people are also going to the accessibility committee, and I have another one that I can be a little bit late for 1:15. But anyway, we'll keep on moving as quickly as possible. Some of these aren't as a large, they are all important, but they're not maybe as more. We don't have presentations. 5.3, the status of the audit projects. There's for information, and if there's any questions on those for staff, but there's no presentation.
I can move it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, it's been moved. All in favor? Carried. 5.4 is the status of management action plans, and this again is for information. Any questions or comments?
I'll move it, Mr. Chair. It's Chris.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Fonseca. All those in favor? And carried. 5.5 is the energy commodity procurement policy update. And that's an update. And you see it there. Any questions, comments? And that's a motion. Councillor Dasko, would you like to move that? Is he there? I can't see everybody. I don't hear any. Okay, Councillor Rass?
I'll move it. I think Councillor Dasko had to pop out to another meeting briefly. I don't know if he's coming back into this one.
Okay, so 5.5, all those in favor? Carried. And 5.6 is another motion on the debt management policy. Any questions, comments? Councillor Sinclair.
I move the report, sir.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Sinclair. All those in favor? Carried. We don't have any communications. I don't see any other business unless somebody's going to bring that up from the committee. I don't see anything flashing in front of me here. We do have an in-camera matter that the Audit and Risk Committee move in camera to consider matters related to item 8.1, Information Technology, Security, Governance, and Management Audit. Councillor Sinclair, I see you're moving it. Could you unmute? Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Move it.
Okay.
In camera.
In camera, and the clerk, if you can suggest that anyone not involved in this meeting be excluded or muted or out.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Starr. Yes, and I will make a note here that prior to moving into closed session, we will need a few minutes. First, we'll have to complete the confidentiality oath, and then we'll need a little time to allow clerk staff to close our meeting. So I will read the confidentiality. As per the rules of electronic participation, each of you must declare that you will adhere to the confidentiality standards as outlined in the Regional Council Code of Conduct. I will read this section and take as read if there are no objections. When making decisions, the regional chair and members of council and committee will have access to information that may be confidential or contentious. The regional chair and members of council and committee will respect and maintain the confidentiality of information communicated to them in confidence by staff or colleagues. They will not disclose a document or information contained within a document provided for use in connection with a closed meeting of regional council, a committee of council, or any body to which the member has been appointed by regional council. The regional chair and members of council and committee will not disclose the deliberations of a closed session without the prior permission of the body holding the closed session. Do I hear any objections? Hearing none, taken as read. Thank you. So before we go in, I am going to actually also just list the names of the people who should be in camera this afternoon. So we will have our Commissioner Sean Baird, Interim Commissioner Catherine Lockyer, Jennifer Weinman, Steve Van de Ven, Arthur Mikulek, and we will also have 3 external consultants from KPMG, Rob, Kareem, and Dave, who I will let them, Jennifer will introduce them when we go in camera with full names. And we will now take our moments that we need to sign everybody out. Thank you.
Just move directly back into session.
We can move directly back in. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Okay, then we'll move receipt of the presentation with respect to.
So moved.
I'm sorry, I missed. So was somebody trying to speak or? Okay, Councillor
We're just moving the direction. Yes, thank you.
I think your camera and voice is stopped. Councillor Sinclair, are you there?
We got his orange triangle of death.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah. I move it, sir.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, and then let's revert back just for a quick moment to other business. I think, Neil, you wanted to bring something forward for further discussion.
Thank you, Chairman Stell. Can you hear me clearly? I've had to change headphones and I'm not sure it's working.
Yeah, that's a little bit better, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have 2 requests, if I may. One concerning item 5.2, I think it was, particularly the state of good repair. And basically one of the challenges of operating a large and complex IT infrastructure is balancing the need to maintain and update older systems with the need for newer ones. Could we have a report, perhaps at the November meeting, on the constraints caused by the older technologies we have and the impact of updating or not updating, the difference between the two, on in particular the life cycle cost of ownership and risk and security challenges? Can I propose that? We ask for a report on that.
Okay. Well, we'll provide that as direction.
And secondly, concerning the IT risk management function, my understanding is there is a number of risk management functions in Peel, such as I believe there's one in the water, looking after the water and things like that. And I have no feel for how they interact. I'd like to request that we have an overview of all the risk management in Peel, not necessarily sometime next year, not an immediate one, and discuss whether there are opportunities to improve the effectiveness and reduce costs from the use of common standards, processes, and tools. They seem to me, my perception is they're a bit independent, and often there are ways of that building a better risk management approach if we can join them up a bit. But this is, I'm looking for response to feedback on this as a proposal. Thank you. I shall yield back.
Okay, I'm not sure if staff want to respond to that, or do we just provide that as direction and then come back with an answer? Can someone?
So, through the chair, yeah, so Sean Baird here, happy to address the first request and bring back a discussion on the state of good repair portfolio and the implications of those pieces of technology. And I would defer to Jennifer on the second request.
Great.
And through the chair, this is Jennifer here. And yes, we will endeavor to bring back a presentation containing information about the various risk functions across the organization, and then the corporate enterprise risk management function, and then how each are guided through their various bodies or legislation that dictate their roles, and we can have a discussion from there.
Great. Okay, so staff understand your direction, and if there's any clarification, please get a hold of Mr. Fairhead. Okay, any other new business, old business? Seeing none, the next meeting is scheduled for October 15th, 2020. And if that gives anybody any problems, as usual, just let us know, and just in case we have to reschedule, whatever. And other than that, it's 12:57 p.m. We're out of here by 1 o'clock, so there's no overtime pay for anybody. So thank you very much for attending. Moved by Councillor Fonseca. Adjournment. All those in favor, those opposed, carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
There was a lot of information today.
Thank you.
Thank you to staff.
Thank you.
Job.
Thank you.